Okay. So anyway, I hope you enjoy AP Hill. We'll see how we feel at the end, or how I feel. I've basically I've got an hour I need to try to fit in 8 pages into, and what I wish to do in the first 8 pages, and I'll do the whole program, but the first 8 pages will take us through Gettysburg, which is why you're all here anyway. But I want to work up to Gettysburg. Now we'll have our break. And if you want to come back after that, I'll go a little bit past Gettysburg. It won't be as long as the first half by any stretch, thank God. But I'll go on into some of the stuff I'm quickly referencing. In other words, it's the part that I wanted to originally, I intended to have part of this program, but got cut out. So I'm bound and determined to get it in here, right here. So thank you all for coming. All right, so what else can I say about Ambrose Powell Hill that you don't already know? AP Hill's a soldier. He's a professional soldier. He's professional. That's the first thing you start out knowing about AP Hill. That's what he was born to do on November 9th, 1825, which would make him 38 here, right? 37 at the Battle of Gettysburg. He's from Culpeper, Virginia. And in his childhood, he studied books on Napoleon, probably biographies of the time, and played war with his friends. He wanted to be a soldier. He received, his family being wealthy, he received a good education at a private boarding school. And in 1842, he didn't have much of a problem getting into West Point because he had an above average education. He was not a U.S. Grant, that started from, or T.J. Jackson for that matter, who started behind the curve. Because of their poor education. So 1842, he gets into West Point. He was 16 years old at the time. I've got a 16-year-old at the house. And he ain't getting into West Point. He ain't getting into West Point. Now, Hill's class, or when he got into the military academy, his freshman year included George B. McClellan, who is a future Union general. T.J. Jackson was in there. Also, in January of 43, about a year in, Little Mac, as McClellan was known, stood at the top of his class while Jackson stood at the bottom. Shows you education. But Jackson finished, didn't he? That's what I always tell my kids. Don't you ever give me an excuse, right? Your daddy's from Mississippi, right? How many excuses you need? AP Hill is right where their daddy was in school. C's get degrees. All right? Would y'all think I made A's? You really think so? You ever go in the doctor's office and ask him his GPA? At the age of 16, he probably wasn't in a bad place to be at 16 in the middle of your class. That's not bad. Some of those men young men probably be in their 20s. He's ranked in the middle. By the end of 43 and 44, Hill had risen to a respectable 23rd out of 66 cadets, and in the summer of 44, as a reward to the class, I think they usually did this the second year maybe, or third year that they were at West Point, the cadets would get their first furlough. Now, a furlough means you get vacation time. That's what Hill was looking forward to. And to get, if you know your logistics, even modern day logistics, in order to get to West Point or from West Point, from this area, you are going to be hard pressed to miss New York City. Okay? That lady in the middle smiling over, she must know where this is going right here. Well, on the way back, he passed through New York. And for an 18-year-old, the city must have contrasted quite sharply with the doldrums of West Point. Now, despite the warnings of the West Point superintendent to avoid, quote unquote, The harems of pleasure on Church and Mercer Street. Church and Mercer Street in the Soho district, if you'd like. If you'd like to know where to go nowadays, check out the New York Post. They'll be able to tell you wherever you're not supposed to be, right there. But he went down to Church and Mercer Street. Now, I looked this up before coming out here, and there was actually a guide, a gentleman's guide, made up in 1852. And it listed them all. And within one block, I don't know what was happening in the 1840s, in one block of Mercer Street, there were 12 brothels. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know who's laughing over there, by God. I'll tell you what. And he's 18 years old. Right? I mean, you ladies have no appreciation. What?
Ask about the picture?
Yeah. I think that's the Richmond statue. No. But you know, he wasn't snapping too many pictures for his fame. I'm getting you a young picture. I only got 5 pictures, AP Hill. You gotta give me a chance here. And one statue. Right there. Yeah, AP Hill. Well, he goes. Or should I say? No, I'm not going to say that. Yeah, he goes, right? Okay, so, you know, it's just biology, people. He's 18 years old. And all the men that are in this room know what I'm talking about. He'd been sitting up there in West Point, and it's all male. And he got down New York City, and no telling what those trollops were doing when he went by there. I remember wanting to work this word in for quite a while, right? They were slattered by the time Hill got through. Look that one up, my well-educated public. Slatter. Right there. When Hill came through. Okay, so he contracted gonorrhea. And even then, gonorrhea was easily detectable by doctors. 3 days to 2 weeks after contact, Hill would have experienced, quote, the urge to urinate frequently, with burning pain and with much thick pus in the urine, end of quote. Treatment consisted of regular, I'm not going to slaughter these, I always do horrible medical work. Treatment consisted of regular doses of Copaiba, C-O-P-A-I-B-A. Anybody? I don't know. It ain't good, whatever it is. Which one person described, quote, as a thick, yellowish, brown, spicy smelling liquid with an ungodly taste used for everything under the sun, most especially gonorrhea. Sometimes to cure stubborn gonorrhea, doctors used silkweed root put in whiskey and rank, giving at the same time pills of rosin from the pine tree with very small pieces of blue vitriol. Is that how you say that? Vitriol? V-I-T-R-I-O-L. Vitriol. Of course, like everything else, it was useless until the advent of penicillin in the 1940s. All right, unless you're starting out in like grade school being promiscuous, we have all had penicillin all of our lives. Anyway, what this ends up doing right here, oh, I forgot her. I didn't put her in the notes. This was in the Gentleman's Guide from 1853. I don't know who she was. But she was the queen of Mercer Street. Guaranteed. Okay, I'm just telling you right there. Any a dashing man right there. Okay, so he did not recover sufficiently until the spring of 1845, and after such a long absence, an examining board stated he had to repeat. That's what he had to do. So he repeats his third year, but nevertheless, he finishes by 1847. It's not bad for going in at 1842. So it takes him, 5 years to graduate West Point. Being a middle of the C student like he was, he doesn't get the plumb engineering assignments. You all know this. You know where he's headed. He's headed to the infantry. Okay, that's where C students go. They get to charge earthworks right there. He was assigned to the American Army in Mexico. He subsequently contracted typhoid fever, if the poor soul could get any more. But his stout heart continued to carry him through, and he recovered from this also. In 1850, found Hill stationed in Florida, and while there he contracted yellow fever. Or he had a recurrence of gonorrhea. I don't know which one. What is known is that he had to relinquish duty for several months. So I think it is fair to say, or the question that we need to apply, and let me just say this, I have made not solely, but I have made a good living on Dan Sickles, A.P. Hill, Earl Van Dorn. People y'all love sex and violence. You could put any program, I could title it Sex and Violence. I fill the whole auditorium up right here. Right here. For the next one. Well, we're trying to keep it a family show, sir, for your daughter. But this is what I wish to say in all seriousness, though. He had typhoid. He had some type of STD. I'm going to say it's gonorrhea. It's the most closely resembled. I'm going to say he might have had yellow fever, may or may not have. Is it fair to say, and I am not a medical expert, that some of the symptoms that Hill has for the rest of his life may have been from these other illnesses? In other words, in much light as I have made of his indiscretions in the 1850s when he's 18 years old, was that really what was plaguing A.P. Hill? And I don't know if I can ever say 100%, or anybody can. Bud Robertson, who did the biography on Hill, said that, consulted medical experts, and it was, Robertson came to the opinion that it was gonorrhea. Now, why is it important? I think that's the most important question I can ask. Why am I making such hay out of this? As the program continues, Hill's health is unavoidable. It is a big, big part of the picture, and it is unavoidable. So I feel from a historical standpoint, should he be judged from one indiscretion, should anybody be judged for one indiscretion when he's 18 years old? We've all had this argument together, Unfortunately, this is a mistake that plagues him the rest of his life. That moment right there. So, let's look at how it plagues him. This lady right here is Mary Ellen Marcy. And besides her and Winfield Scott Hancock's wife, I find them two of the most beautiful ladies in pictures from the Civil War. I just think she's a grand dame right there. Well, guess who else thought? All right, Ambrose Powell Hill. Yeah, McClellan thought that too. And in 1855, the often-mentioned love affair between Ellen Marcy took place. Ellen Marcy was a beauty. She was the daughter of Major Randolph Marcy, a professional soldier, a graduate of West Point. Ellen was 21. Blonde, blue-eyed, and sprightly. Only one problem stood between A.P. Hill, though, and Ellen. That's George McClellan. And you know what happened to George? Darndest thing. He got assigned to another station. Well, Hill moved on in. When I was in Vicksburg, the rivermen, the people that used to go out and work on the river barges, referred to the gentleman that comes by your house while you're out on the river as Jody. Well, Jody came by my house while I was gone. I had to get rid of her. That's a ubiquitous term right there, all right? Well, Hill was that guy. He moved right in on her. Now watch what happens. Before the Marcys, meaning the parents, knew how serious the two were, Ambrose and Ellen were engaged. We can do better than that. 1, 2, 3. Oh, there we go. All right. But Mrs. Marcy played her trump card. And what is her trump card? Woo, Lordy. She told Ellen about Hill's problem. As was his character, and you'll see this as the program unfolds, Hill was outraged. He wrote Major Marcy, y'all listen to this. I have been most deeply injured, but the peculiar nature and unknown source of the calumny prevents my seeking that redress which would be most pleasing and most satisfactory. I have heard from truthful lips and with delicacy that Mrs. Marcy's objections are from that certain early imprudences, parentheses, youthful indiscretions, I suppose. My health and constitution have become so impaired, so weakened, that no mother could yield her daughter to me unless to certain unhappiness. This is the substance, the ornaments may be imagined. Oh, I love that last sentence. The ornaments may be imagined. Only a gentleman would understand that paragraph right there. Okay? Well, guess what? I think I can sum up the end of this story in a picture. Are there any other questions?
Comment.
Yeah.
A.P. Hill was in the wedding.
Yeah. You think he liked it? On July 31st, 1856, they broke off the engagement, or Ellen did. So I don't know how long the engagement went, if I knew. Ellen later married George B., as you can say, and later in the Civil War, during the 7 Days campaign outside Richmond, Hill faced Little Mac in the midst of terrible cannon fire as the Confederates were pinned down on the ground outside Beaver Dam Creek. The cry was heard above the battlefield sounds, "Oh, Miss Marcy, oh, Miss Marcy, why didn't you marry him?" Because Hill's out for revenge. You understand, ma'am, my wrestling friend, right there. They were fighting each other, and it was personal. Okay, so let's get into it. On February 26, 1862, Hill received a promotion to brigadier general. That's early, February 62. His first battle at this level of command was at Williamsburg, and the counterattack during that engagement made him the most conspicuous commander on the field. On May 26, only 4 months after receiving his brigadier commission, Hill received appointment to major general. Right? I'm not John Cena over here. 4 years. And he's already there. And he assumed command of the famed 6th Brigade Light Division. No other division has 6 brigades. Do I need to do this again? Our pyramid scheme? How many times can we do this on film, right? Army commander, let's do it together. Corps, division, brigade, regiment. Right? Let's do it from the bottom. Regiment, brigade, division, corps. So A.P. Hill is commanding a division, which is comprised of 6 brigades. That's huge. Keep that in mind. I'll come back to that in just a minute. So he's obviously got talent. He's obviously not a dum-dum to be receiving these fast promotions. Before all the battles whittled away his strength, his combat strength, Hill originally commanded 14,000 to 15,000 men initially. That's a lot of men for a novice, anybody. It was in the early summer of '62 that Hill came under the eye of Robert E. Lee, during the 7 Days campaign. Hill displayed initiative, aggressiveness, and independence, traits that Lee liked so well. He also displayed another trait that can be both laudable and loathing. Do you like that? Impetuosity. He's impetuous. All right? At the Battle of Mechanicsville, Hill was to launch a frontal attack while the renowned Stonewall Jackson struck the rear. Well, Jackson never showed. I don't have time to go into all this. And Hill finally just launched the attack on his own across there. And it's just a bloody debacle. And some of the finest troops, you know, if you had a window and you could see the war was going to go on more than 1 year, you probably wouldn't do that. A lot of good men die and attacking for nothing. Hill attacks, and he showed more restraint and scored more success at subsequent battles a few days later at Gaines' Mill and Frazier's Farm. But overall, in a poor showing of Confederate generalship during the 7 days, Hill's performance was better than most. I mean, it just stood out. This did not escape Robert E. Lee's eye. In the aftermath of the campaign that saved Richmond, that was the 7 days, Hill became involved in a feud with his then superior wing commander, a guy by the name of James Longstreet. Y'all gonna boo him too? Tough crowd. The feud centered around credit for the battle, which soon became a tit for tat in the local Richmond newspapers, and revealed Hill's nature of taking slight at the smallest criticism or impugnment against his quote-unquote honor. This is another theme, impetuosity, and he is very sensitive about his honor. A.P. Hill is a prickly guy. All right, he knows, let me put it to you this way, he knows rules and regulations and he knows etiquette. At the time he is as a cadet at the West Point Military Academy at home recuperating from an STD. He still has the energy to write the academy and remind them that he needs his stipend sent to him because he's due. You know, that's who he is right here. Well, anyway, they get for a tit for tat, him and Longstreet. The friction with Longstreet escalated until legend has it that a duel was in the making. I don't think it ever got off the ground. Lee, of course, heard of this disagreement and moved quickly to squash it, which he would, or quash it. Hill was transferred to Stonewall Jackson's command to smooth things over. Well, if you can't get along with James Longstreet, wait till you get to Jackson. Such a misunderstood man. Yeah. just a bowl of laughs right here. Right here. I think, just as extra added trivia, y'all correct me if I'm wrong, is this the picture he sewed the button back on?
Yep.
Is it?
It's
The one at right angles?
no, it's the one where it was wrinkled.
Okay. So anyway, as you know, Jackson and Hill are going to clash from the beginning. Hill was actually a very extroverted and gregarious fellow. And next to this dour Presbyterian found in Stonewall Jackson, the frozen chosen over here, he must have, I can say I'm Presbyterian, very loose interpretation. He must have appeared happy indeed, but there lay the rub. Jackson could get along with his superiors, but he could not get along with his subordinates, right? So that's going to lead to a problem. Hill, on the other hand, could get along with his subordinates, but could never get along with his superiors. You see how it's going? Yin and yang here. And these two men are prima donnas. I don't know if you say Jackson. They're just both very, very professional army. You know, they can quote rules and regulations. The two men seem to be able to get along during combat situations, though. At the Battle of Cedar Mountain, it was Hill that saved Jackson's bacon by arriving at the nick of time. At Second Manassas, Hill showed fine abilities in conducting an defensive battle around Sudley Church, which Jackson complimented him for. At one point, when Hill requested reinforcements, Jackson responded he had none, but to hold his position. Hill did just that, and when he sent word to Jackson, his commander responded, "Tell him I knew he would do it." But by the Antietam campaign, Hill was under arrest for basically not living up to the punctilious nature of the obsessive Jackson. If you can look it up, the charges of the Hassler biography on Hill in the appendix has Jackson's charges against Hill listed in there. It's like 5 or 6 charges. And they're real ticky-tack. Didn't stop for March at 10 till the hour. Didn't begin March right at 5 o'clock in the morning. That's what Jackson wants. He wants everything on the minute and stopped on the minute. And he doesn't get it. So anyway, because of that, he's under arrest. Hill is. With battle imminent, Hill swallowed his pride and asked to be reinstated, and Jackson relented. Once in command again, Hill shook off his illness that had shown itself, and, quote, donning his coat and sword, he mounted his horse and dashed to the front of his troops, and looking like a young eagle in search of his prey, he took command of his division to the delight of his men. Douglas Southall Freeman wrote of Hill and his march of 17 miles from Harper's Ferry to Antietam, or Sharpsburg, in 5 hours. 17 miles in 5 hours. Put 30 pounds on you and go out and try it sometime, okay, and see if you can do it. Dr. Freeman wrote, the impetuosity that had been his vice was now his spur. Every sound of fire was his summons. Speed the march. Close up, close up. The life of the Confederacy might depend on the pace of that one division. Bruce Catton described the march this way, quote, Hill drove his men so cruelly that he left fully half of his division panting along the roadside, but he got up those who were left in time to stave off disaster and kept the war going for 2.5 years more. By that. And the rest is history. Hill's division saves Lee's army at Sharpsburg. And this is arguably the reason I'm going into this, and with hindsight being my benefactor, this is the pinnacle of Hill's military career. I mean, this is at his finest, that march to Antietam, the light division and so forth. Now, as you know, in life, you're up one day and down the next. One of the tactical faults that A.P. Hill seemed to make was a lack of ability to oversee the fine details of his battle line. And I mean this on both a corps and a division level. Hill does not pay attention to detail consistently. He does not seem to be in the weeds type of guy, that would go out. At the Battle of Fredericksburg, Hill failed to cover a 600 long gap along the line at Fredericksburg. I don't know how well you can see that, but that's the bottom blue arrow. Hill felt that a low swampy area between Archer and Lane could not or would not be breached by the Federals. Hill's oversight was partly due to his genuine concern for the welfare of his men who were tired, and he didn't want to put his men into the low, wet, cold, and swampy ground. But nevertheless, the Yankees did not care about Hill's problems or his men, and that none other than George Meade, y'all ever heard of him, is going to punch it in, and Hill is going to have to fight for his life to close that gap right there. Now, at the next battle, this is in December of 62, and May of 1863, we have the final battle preceding Gettysburg, and that is Chancellorsville. Jackson rolls into that attack with 3 divisions lined up on Joe Hooker's flank, and A.P. Hill is in the back. or the last division in line. It is when Jackson is accidentally mortally wounded by his own men. It is A.P. Hill as the senior division commander that is summoned to the front. And despite the disagreement and the court martials and the back and forth between these two men, I should have said this earlier, reportedly, legend has it, that the dispute between Hill and Jackson got so bad that Lee came to Jackson's headquarters at Bunker Hill, present-day West Virginia. And he called the two men into Jackson's tent and they closed the flaps. It was about an hour. Now, legend has it that reportedly Robert E. Lee, while he was seated at the table, looked at the two men and he said to them, "The man that is most aggrieved should be the first to apologize." Nothing. Well, y'all think I was going to work? No. No. But when Jackson goes down, accidentally mortally wounded, it's A.P. Hill that comes up. It's A.P. Hill that is there leaning over Jackson. And Jackson, he's asking Jackson, "What should I do? What should I do?" And Jackson's in so much pain. I don't know if he'd had painkillers yet, but he's in an awful lot of pain if he hadn't. And he says, "I just can't think. Cut them off from United States forward. You must do the best you think, Hill." But he trusted him. And shortly thereafter, before we can find out what A.P. Hill would have done with his chance, Hill is wounded himself. Most of y'all forget that because it's overshadowed by Jackson's mortal wounding. But A.P. Hill is wounded not shortly after Jackson. Now, with the death of Jackson, that is going to reprompt Robert E. Lee to reorganize his army. And how is he going to reorganize the army? Before the battle, Lee had his army divided into two wings of 30,000 men apiece. Who are the two wing commanders? You know one of them, Jackson and Longstreet. In the aftermath, Lee felt this arrangement to be unwieldy. Writing President Davis on May 20th, he says, quote, "I have for the past year felt the corps of the army." See, I got that S in on that, buddy, see? "The corps of the army were too large for one commander. The loss of Jackson from command of one half the army seems to me a good opportunity to remedy this evil. In this event, I also submit to you whether it would not be well to promote Ewell and A.P. Hill." Did you see what Lee did with Jefferson Davis there? No other commander does that. You know who you're talking to, right? I tell my children that all the time. You know? Do I look like a friend to you? In this event, it's what Lee writes, "In this event, I also submit to you whether it would not be well to promote Ewell or A.P. Hill." In other words, this is what I think, Mr. President. What do you think? And what did he do? Davis backed him because he didn't dictate to somebody like Jefferson Davis. That's the brilliance right there. He picked his battles. The former, meaning Ewell, is an honest, brave soldier who has always done his duty well. The latter, I think upon the whole, meaning A.P. Hill, is the best soldier of his grade with me. And that is Robert E. Lee's endorsement of A.P. Hill's promotion. On May 24th, remember, Battle of Chancellorsville is first week of May. May 24th, 3 weeks later, Hill gets his promotion. There was little said within the Army about the promotions of Hill and Ewell. In the post-war years, Longstreet thoughtfully pointed out that both D.H. Hill and Lafayette McLaws were both senior to A.P. Hill. You will have to study that in your own mind. That's a what if D.H. Hill and Lafayette McLaws would have been better. But Longstreet went on to tactfully state that D.H. Hill, quote, was the superior. When I say tactfully, I meant that facetiously. Was the superior of General A.P. Hill in rank, skill, judgment, and distinguished services. Longstreet attributed McLaws and D.H. Hill being passed over to the Virginia factor. What does that mean? All right, you know, what does that mean? Right? What did John Adams write? Thomas Jefferson. Every Virginia goose thinks it's a swan. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah. How many Virginians does it take to change a light bulb? One to change the light bulb, and 4 to tell you how good the old one was. Oh, come on, man. I was like, you people standing up in the back ought to really appreciate that. I'm trying my best for you up here. The new Confederate Third Corps was put together with Richard Anderson's division being shifted from Longstreet's corps over to Hill. Hill's former light division, remember that was 6 brigades. Remember this, you Gettysburg buffs should know this. I think Angie may have put it on the test. Oh. I heard that test was a doozy. Oh, okay. Dorsey Pender gets the remnants of the light division. Out of 6 brigades, right, 4 of them go to Pender's division. The other 2 brigades from the light division go to the final division under Henry or Harry Heath. And they are augmented, right, by Pettigrew and Davis, who need to be fit in there, into there. So there you go. Anderson, Pender, and Heath. 3 divisions, A.P. Hill as the Corps commander. That sets up Gettysburg. The story of A.P. Hill, Harry Heath, and the advance on Gettysburg is well known. In fact, it's probably one of the most debated points in the battle. What did Hill know and when did he know it? Now, that question we will perhaps, without more sources or somebody else coming to light, we only get bits and pieces. I don't know if it'll ever be fully defined. What is also not known, and also perhaps will never be known, is how much Hill's illness affected his decisions and performances during the Battle of Gettysburg. That's why his illness is relative to me, or relevant to me, right here. Lee's objective in the Gettysburg campaign is Harrisburg, which is way up there at that top. And that'll even be controversial because it's Gettysburg. Matt said the objective was Harrisburg. I've never read that before, right there. But clearly the Confederate columns are going to get to Harrisburg and then make a decision. Is it written anywhere? No, but they're going there. I mean, does anybody want to debate that? No, I don't want to debate it. Lee's objective was moving north with the initial objective sights being set on Harrisburg. All that changed on June 28th with the arrival of a scout named Harrison. He informed Lee that the Union Army had crossed the Potomac River and was moving into Maryland. Now, I spent a lot of time, ladies and gentlemen, reading this right in front of me and not reading it. Have you ever had that? Did you ever sign a contract and then get the details, read the details later? A.P. Hill goes to Robert E. Lee's headquarters, and based on the latest intelligence, Harrison the scout informs Lee that the Union Army is in Maryland. That is true. That is portrayed on the movie, if that's what you're basing your history on. What they don't What they don't, what I overlooked, and I mean this personally, which was right in front of you, y'all probably gathered it very quickly. That's cute. I'm that bad. And make it 10 minutes before she was asleep. The key thing about that intelligence that Harrison the scout reports is that the Union Army, he reports that the Union Army is not moving north, people. He reports that the Union Army is moving west from Frederick. In other words, they're taking the national road. What is that, I-40? 40, that's I-40, you know, or I think they're parallel to each other. US what? US 40. Okay. So, based on that intelligence, Robert E. Lee thinks that from Frederick, Maryland, the Union Army is moving toward Sharpsburg and Williamsport and toward Hagerstown. Robert E. Lee doesn't want the Union Army on the west side of the mountains. He wants them on the east side. To put it another way, Robert E. Lee wants the Union Army on the Gettysburg side of the mountains, not the obverse side of the mountains. You can see it when you walk out of the building. He wants them over here. How do you get the Union Army to come at you? You concentrate your army, and once that intelligence, it's hard to hide 70,000 men. Once that intelligence starts boomeranging around the region right there, that Union Army should come after you, because the Achilles tendon of the Union Army is here. They will cover Washington. They will. You know that. I mean, that's not, I don't even think going out on a limb to say that. So what is Lee doing? He's the matador. Can't say that word much anymore. But he's the matador, and he wants that bull to come at him. Well, as we all know, this sets up A.P. Hill on July 1st. The Union Army is not going west. The Union Army is going north. You can see it in the arrows. They're headed toward Gettysburg. That's how they collide. But if you want to understand A.P. Hill's mindset on the eve of Gettysburg, he is, and you'll see it in the quote here, his perception is that the Union Army, it could only be the vanguard of it. The Union Army is nowhere near Gettysburg, Pennsylvania. Okay? So let's see how this unfolds. Okay. Now, A.P. Hill led the advance from the west with the division of Henry Heath in the vanguard. On the night of June 29th, Heath's men encamped at Cashtown, which was 9 miles to the west of Gettysburg. I should well know where that is. The next day, Heath sent James Pettigrew's brigade marching down the Chambersburg Pike with orders to search the town for army supplies, shoes especially. Okay, and return the same day. Heath's statement is important because some Gettysburg buffs accuse of inventing this story in the post-war years. However, the first mention of shoes is written in his after-action report of September 3rd, 1863. All right. So, Captain Lewis G. Young of Pettigrew's adjutant, I'm on the brigade level now, recalled peremptory orders not to bring on a fight. That means you go march your brigade to Gettysburg. Why are they marching to Gettysburg? Because they don't have any cavalry. James J. Pettigrew's North Carolinians should have never been assigned the task of going to Gettysburg. There was just no one else to do it. So the infantry had to wear out some good feet and some good shoes to go 16 miles round trip from Cashtown to back to find out what was happening. Heath advised Pettigrew that a contingent of home guard might be present, but, quote, if he should find any organized troops capable of making resistance or any portion of the Army of the Potomac, he should not attack it. The next day, June 30th, Pettigrew marched his command to town, and along the way, this is interesting, Longstreet's spy, which I assume is Harrison, it just says Longstreet's spy, but wouldn't that be neat? Harrison goes out in front of the rest of the Union, if that's him, if that's Longstreet's spy, which I assume it is, he comes back, riding back from Gettysburg along Highway 30, and he meets up with Pettigrew. And there was also a member of the Knights of the Golden Circle, which is a pro-Southern group of some type, some kind of group. You had to do more. Prevalent in Indiana, I believe, in Illinois and Ohio and so forth. But anyway, he's got a member here. And these two gentlemen informed Pettigrew that John Buford's Union Cavalry Division lay ahead. Upon reaching the outskirts, Pettigrew observed Union forces to the south. The trees were not that thick along where the seminary is and where the modern-day YWCA is. I take it you could see further back in 1863. But wherever he was, or Pettigrew was, he could see the Union forces in the distance. And Pettigrew would take his binoculars out and he would study that cavalry for a little while. And he's watching them. Now this guy, Pettigrew, is a former mathematics professor from UNC. And he's no dummy, but he's no professional soldier. But Pettigrew, observing these cavalrymen, comes to the determination that this is not National Guard. Their movements are too complex, or in other words, they're too darn organized for militia. These people look like they know what they're doing, the way they're maneuvering out there. And so Pettigrew does what he's supposed to do. He goes back and he reports what he saw. He pulls back to Cashtown. Upon arriving, Pettigrew was making his report to Heath when A.P. Hill rode up. Heath and Pettigrew repeated the story to the Corps commander. Heath later wrote that both he and Hill were incredulous that Union forces were in Gettysburg. Hill said, as I have done, Heath later wrote that there was any force at Gettysburg except possibly a small cavalry vedette. I garbled that, but what that means is that Heath and Hill are arguing with Pettigrew that he didn't see what he saw, is what they're arguing with him. Captain Young, that aide that I mentioned earlier, stated, quote, that they expressed their doubts so positively that Pettigrew asked Captain Young, that aide, to join the conversation. Since Young had previously served under Hill, Pettigrew hoped his report would carry some weight through this moment. Yeah.
And A.P. Hill said that he hoped they were there because that's exactly where he wanted them to be.
Oh, yeah. Oh, most definitely. Cocky. Yeah. Thank you. I know, it's funny too. Young expressed the opinion that the soldiers that had followed their return to Cashtown were not home guard but regular troops, backing up Pettigrew. Hill again expressed doubt and in emphatic words expressed the hope that it was. This was the place he wanted it to be. Young believed, quote, that this, quote unquote, spirit of disbelief had so affected the top officers so that no one but Pettigrew believed they were marching into a confrontation. With that, he turned to Hill and said, if there is no objection, I will march my division tomorrow, go to Gettysburg, and secure those shoes. And reportedly, A.P. Hill said, none in the world. Heath and Hill may not have believed that Union forces were in Gettysburg, but they certainly knew how to hedge their bets. And when I mean hedge their bets, ladies and gentlemen, for somebody that wasn't expecting a fight, Harry Heath goes down the road with his whole division, backed by his wagon train and a battalion, not a battery, a battalion of artillery, which is 4 batteries, I think, in the Confederate Army. That's a lot of firepower. That's about 8,000 men in the vanguard and about 20 to 25 guns up here. Come on down. You can sit down. He backs that up with Pender's division. Another 7,000 to 8,000 men backed by another battalion of artillery. You got 15,000 veteran Confederate infantry coming down the Highway 30. You have got enough firepower there to take on whoever you want. And so here they come. They're coming down the road. On July 1st, Hill authorized the 2 divisions to move forward from Cashtown. In addition to Heath, he ordered Anderson's division to follow up, even though Anderson was a few miles in the back. He'd get all mixed up with Longstreet and stuff and take him a few hours to get up. Hill drastically underestimated the force in his front, and the pleading of Lewis Young, a staff officer on Pettigrew's brigade who had seen the Federals firsthand, went unheeded. It did nothing to dissuade the newly minted corps commander. Lee was blinded perhaps by his own illness, the heart attack. We've years past we've had that, with Lee's own afflictions there. What might be holding him up right here, but once again, at the critical moment, the lack of timely intelligence, the lack of Jeb Stuart in this case, the lack of any cavalry out front, puts the Confederate infantry in a bad position. It's hard to extract yourself from a fight on foot. It's a lot easier. That's why they send cavalrymen in. You can shoot a few shots, take a few glances, and then ride on off. Well, you can't do that with infantry. You get, overrun pretty easily if you're caught in the wrong thing. So, here they are. On July 1st, 1863, A.P. Hill is plagued again by some type of illness. Probably gonorrhea. The malady could have been upset stomach, I should say that. Could have been diarrhea. All right. Simple exhaustion. You just want me to say diarrhea again? You just think that was pretty good? Or flare up of the old prostate problem. I took school group out and they wrote their comment cards. The kids wrote their comment cards to me. The only thing they learned from my medical show was diarrhea. They spelled it. One of them spelled it D-I-R-E-A-R. Diarrhea. Right there. Well, at least they learned something, I told the boss. I said, whatever the illness, Hill was confined, I should say, I can't see anymore, to his bed for the first part of the morning and obviously did not feel well. His cannons boomed in the distance. Lee and his staff rode up to Cashtown, and Lee could see that A.P. Hill did not feel well and offered his usual solicitude for the commanding corps commander. By now, the noise of battle emanating from Gettysburg was growing louder. Lee remained calm, but both he and Hill knew that something had gone wrong in Gettysburg. Despite intense pain, Hill mounted up on his horse. Yes, he hurt. Can you imagine? Apparently that infection, or I don't know what to call it, that infection went right into his prostate. So I want you to think about mounting a horse, all right, and the pounding that you're going to get from that. I mean, every step probably killed him. But he mounts up. Action was an elixir to Hill. He seemed to be able to set it aside. He wanted to be there, even when he was sick. The will is there. That's what I want him, if I can make one thing, he is sick, but the will is there. He wants to be there. But he can't. For whatever reason, he's too debilitated. But let's take another aside right here. Can you imagine being A.P. Hill and the commanding general rides up and Bob says, and you don't have an answer. You don't know what's going on. I can't imagine. Oh, well, Lee would, I'm sure Lee took it in stride and everything, but, well, the rest is history. Lee and Hill found, when they did get to the front, Lee and Hill found that Heath, that front division, had been repulsed. Hill will call up Pender's division for a second attack, and from there, Lee basically took on the overall command, at least on the western side of the field, over by Hare's Ridge right there. So as far as A.P. Hill's input into the battle on July 1st, he is present. He is up there. I could give you, single instances where somebody saw him or something like that, but I don't know. I don't have enough detail really to pronounce judgment. I can't tell you he's in an ambulance. I can't tell you how sick he is, how well he is for that matter. It's a hard thing to say. I can say this though, it is telling that A.P. Hill is not up when the fighting starts. He would ordinarily surely have been there. That's the place. That is the place of danger. So anyway, Pender is launched in with the second attack, and Lee takes over. As most of you know, little is known about the next 2 days of battle and A.P. Hill. And this is where really for me it gets kind of hard to justify or rationalize what he's doing here. This is Anderson's division. Let's go back for a quick rehash right here. There are 3 divisions in Hill's Corps: Corps, Division, Brigade, Regiment. The 3 divisions, Anderson, Pender, and Heath. Anderson's division is supposed to attack on July 2nd. As we all know, the Confederate attack is rolling from the bottom of the map to the top of the map. It is rolling, in other words, from the south to the north on the battlefield. Now, as each unit goes in, it trips the next unit in line. And then, subsequently, if I go forward, then the one next to it should go forward, and then the one next to it is called an echelon attack. By the time those falling dominoes get up to Anderson's division, the attack falls apart. Anderson has the largest division out of all of Hill's Corps. He has 5 brigades in that division. Richard Anderson only manages to get 3 in them, 3 of the 5 brigades into the attack. Posey and Mahone do not advance. I'll leave it to y'all to search out the details. But what we're focused on is where in the heck is A.P. Hill during this whole time. All right? And Anderson is not set. We've got some command and control problems down here. Anderson is having problems with one of his brigade commanders, a guy by the name of Billy Mahone. Prickly little man himself, about 5'2", big sombrero, look like ZZ Top. Right here. Right there. Well, he's had a big sombrero on at Petersburg. Anderson tells him to go in, support right on his left, the Confederate left, and Mahone tells staff officer he's not moving. Well, I don't know what the politics were there, but he tells Anderson's staff officer that he has orders from General Anderson to remain in reserve, and the staff officer says, I'm from General Anderson, and he says move forward. Mahone won't do it. That's where Anderson or A.P. Hill should be there. You go down there and you straighten that out. And let's tell something even more telling. When the attack continues off this map, you never see a map with this on here because it never happened. The next division in line for Hill's command is Dorsey Pender's. Pender gets ready to continue those falling dominoes, right? And as soon as he rides out and he gets by his 2 oak trees, or 1 oak tree now, on West Confederate Avenue, he gets hit. And reportedly the fuse plug, the thing you screw into the shell, that zinc fuse plug, embedded itself in his thigh. right there. Okay? I mean, a hunk of zinc in your leg. I mean, that had to hurt. But Pender's, according to a Georgia newspaper correspondent, Pender's brigade commanders, the whole division doesn't go forward because Pender's brigade commanders are arguing over seniority. You Americans look like, if you United States citizens act like that's a bad thing going on. What y'all moaning about? Whose side y'all on? Pender, when he goes down, you got to have A.P. Hill. A.P. Hill has got to get in there and figure that out. Whether it's right or wrong, you go down there and make a decision. Now, where is Hill? What is the age-old question of where is A.P. Hill during the Battle of Gettysburg? The only known sighting of A.P. Hill on July 2nd, y'all might be interested in, is somewhere here. Somewhere in here. He's down here. Now, whether he rode to the peach orchard to get a vantage point to where he could see, or where he went, but the account of Hill on July 2nd says that he and his staff were engaged in rallying some of Longstreet's troops, which I imagine was the detritus of, the flotsam and jetsam of battle coming back. Maybe Wofford's brigade, something like that. Hill is where he's not supposed to be. Now, he may be on the flank so he can see. I mean, I see his logic, but why? It's very hard for me to make a judgment on him because I don't know what he knew and when he knew it. What kind of information did he have and when did he have it? Did he know, ladies and gentlemen, that this was going on at the time, or did he not? I cannot answer that question. So I'm not saying he's shirking his duty, because he's obviously not a cowardly man by any stretch of the imagination, but he's physically not there. And I don't understand what the breakdown is. But I couldn't say a physical ailment. He's on the field. I'm sure he wasn't 100%. Surely he could move if he could get to the peach. I don't know. He's not where he's supposed to be. And whatever's happening, ladies and gentlemen, well, there you go. They punch it on in and there's no support to it. Writes it. On July 3rd, the next day, I need not tell you, I got A.P. Hill up at the top right here. You've got Hill at the top, Pickett right here, which is from Longstreet's Corps. 2/3, imagine yourself as A.P. Hill, ladies and gentlemen. You wake up on July 3rd, and Robert E. Lee, your boss, tells you that he's going to take 2/3 of your command and give it to James Longstreet, who, as I said in the beginning of this lecture, isn't it funny how time slips away? Folks, that was only a year ago with that court-martial between them. What kind of friction, what kind of animosity was left between the two men? Any? Maybe? Maybe none? Maybe a lot? I don't know. But there's two. Here's Longstreet. So here's gets to the point. There seems to be miscommunication, and a lot of this falls on Robert E. Lee. I'm not blaming A.P. Hill, but you have to wonder what A.P. Hill's mindset is. Was he chagrined by it? Was he thinking it should have been me, since I have 2/3 of the command of the troops in this assault? Should have been me in overall command? It appears to me, or some historians have speculated, that A.P. Hill, once the transfer was made, thought it was immediate. In other words, these troops are now under the command of James Longstreet. Apparently, James Longstreet, according to his report, thought that he took command when the assault began, and that they were under the command of Hill up until then. But regardless of how that happened, probably, well, especially Heath's division, and especially Davis and Brockenbrough, should have never been in this assault. This is very, very poor staff work by the Confederate Army, by A.P. Hill, by Robert E. Lee, on multiple different levels in putting this assault together. In their defense, to push back on my own thing, I've had 160 years to figure this stuff out. They had 5 hours, right? A little more, 6, 7, whatever, depending on when you put the conference. Now, where's A.P. Hill in all this? I don't know. The only sight that we have of A.P. Hill is from an artillerist with Hill's Corps. And this is the following quote. Whilst, you don't see that one anymore. Whilst we were watching this most thrilling scene, General A.P. Hill came and stood within my battery, not 10 feet from the location of my gun, and was watching with us from the position the charge of Pickett's and Pender's men. I shall never forget his appearance on that occasion as long as I live. When he saw Pender's division falter, that's going to be Trimble, when he saw Pender's division falter in its advance and afterwards break and retire, and as he watched with the most intense interest the advance of Pickett's men, General Hill looked to me as if he were dazed, if not confounded at the scene before him. That was, yeah. Can you imagine? I don't know, but he sat there. Now, where was Hill? Hill, I can't say. I don't know the exact time he was there. I don't know if he was there the whole assault. I don't know if it was only a moment or whatever. But the artilleryman who saw Hill was approximately where the National Guard Armory is today, on West Confederate Avenue. And if you think about the smoke from the guns, and if you probably looked at the windage that day, the direction of the wind, you could probably figure out why Hill wanted to stand in that position. Anyway, that's the great thing about preserving. You can go to the National Guard site and you can look across that field and get the same sight that A.P. Hill did that day. And you can look as dumbfounded as he right there when he was doing right there. All right, I'm a little over time. I'm going to close here, but in the spring of 1863, A.P. Hill was the natural selection for Lee to make for higher command. He led the largest division of 6 brigades, and more importantly, he was instinctively an aggressive combat commander. Now, hear me out. The word aggressive and impulsive are very close in meaning. All right? But this, in war, this can be a good trait and a bad one. During the siege of Petersburg, he was, in my opinion, at his finest as a corps commander, when he was healthy. But you constantly see in between, especially the Overland campaign, as the armies moved from Northern Virginia down to Southern Virginia and Petersburg, Hill in 1864 is more consistently sick time after time. The illness continuously is growing worse as the war years continue. So you see these absences, and they always seem to be at the critical time. Such battles, to his credit, as Jerusalem Plank Road, Reams Station, the Crater, showcased Hill's talents. When Hill was able to physically be present, and he physically was present, he was competent. Nevertheless, I don't think he ever overcame his impulsiveness. The first battle I mentioned, Beaver Dam Creek, part of the 7 Days campaign, what did he do? Right there. Bristow Station, which happens in the fall of 63. Most of you are unaware of that. I recommend y'all visit Bristow Station Battlefield outside of Manassas. It's preserved, or 2/3 of it are preserved right there. The botched attacks at Spotsylvania, North Anna. All of this is either impetuous or not physically present or both. But he continuously is coming up short. The the lack of attention to detail at Fredericksburg, leaving that 600-yard gap right there. And of course, finally, what he couldn't help, he had nothing he could do about it, people. The uremia. The uremia, that's your kidneys right there. Hill was a dying man in the last weeks of the war. He was. Whatever he had, ladies and gentlemen, was killing him. It was killing him slowly. It was in his prostate and it was affecting his kidneys at that point. So between the illness and his own personal nature with A.P. Hill, what kind of man do we see revealed here? Who was he? I mean, he's a short guy, real small if you judge him by his coat, you know, in the Museum of the Confederacy, but I don't think it's called that anymore, but, you know, and his cape and so forth. But he's a piece of dynamite as far as his personality. Snappish, always would make a decision, didn't waffle. That's a lot of agreeable traits, something that Robert E. Lee does. But that illness, people, how much between his own shortcomings and the balance that out with the illness which he could not help or could not overcome right there, how much did that factor into his overall performance? That, ladies and gentlemen, is the enigma of Ambrose Powell Hill. Thank you all very much. I appreciate it. How are you?